This is Marlene, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Whether you're watching a video or listening to a podcast, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. Links to videos or MP3 files can be found on MiamiGhostChronicles.com. Go to MarlenePardo.com for information on new book releases. I narrate several podcast series that can be found on major podcast platforms and can also be listened to via Alexa, Sonos, and other home systems. Look for Supernatural Storytime for scary storytelling, Nightshade Diary for classic horror and adventure stories, Stories of the Supernatural for interviews with different guests on the show. If you want to get noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit Strange Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com or find us on Blogspot. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing? I know the show's a little bit staggered, but happy 2022, everybody. A lot of crazy stuff. A lot of crazy stuff. But you know what? Like I tell, I'm always an optimist. And I always, besides looking for the silver lining, I always expect good things to happen. So that's what I'm expecting overall for 2022 to be. And I'm sure there's a lot of you out there that are going, yeah, Marlene, yay. So anyway, first of all, I want to remind you guys, please sign up for my newsletter. Okay, you can go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, MarlenePardo.com. Sign up for my newsletter. It only goes out once a week, and I usually write a short, weird, unusual article, usually a ghost story, sometimes historical mystery, something like that. And on there, I put related videos or podcasts, and I also make announcements of any of the releases of my new books. Like back in September, I had a 100 book giveaway on Goodreads, which is through Amazon. I announced it on that. Anything of that nature, if I'm going to have a live stream like I did for Halloween, and I did one also for New Year's Eve, I announced it on my newsletter. So, like I said, once a week, sign up for my newsletter, MiamiGhostChronicles.com or MarlenePardo.com. A lot of I'm gonna just to let you know, because finally, it's taken me a whole year to settle into North Florida. Yeah, I'm gonna start going out now because I work with findagrave.com, and I've been working with them for many years. And there's a lot of older historical cemeteries, and people will put in their request for photographs of certain graves. So sometimes I go out there and upload them because people have put in the request for a picture. A lot of genealogists work with that, or personal, they're trying to track down a family member. But my point being that along the way, I'm going to be doing cemetery runs. There's a lot of very old, smaller cemeteries here. And you go down these roads and you turn, and all of a sudden you've got the cemetery there. And you could tell, I'm already good at this. You could already tell by some of the monuments there that it's quite old. So, and I know a lot of people had asked me, you used to go to a lot of cemetery runs before. When are you going to start doing it? I'm going to start doing it. And there's a lot of, not only historical, but a lot of them have some very unusual stories and supposed hauntings attached to them. All right, which I will do the research and we'll find out, is there anything there? I'll probably take some type of small obelisk just to see if we pick everything up. But more than anything, what everybody tells me they enjoy is like the historical content, because usually I do say, I talk about who were the founding families, what's the background of the area, et cetera, et cetera. I'll make it interesting, or at least I'll try. And I'm not even going to talk about my chickens, because I know some of you are like, what? Okay, let me tell you real quick. Like everybody knows, I have a lot of young roosters running around, which have been sent out, to the perimeter of the coop by the older roosters. And they're usually the last to roost. The other day I had 3 of them. Usually they'll like spar a little bit and everybody walks away. They're just showing up. The other day I had I have a big red one, and he got two of these young roosters, and one of them especially bloodied them up bad. And it didn't happen while I was here, because normally I would go up there and, break it up. But as a matter of fact, I've got one of my young roosters. He's in, and what's really funny is after they had the fight, and when that red one saw him, he would chase him off and come right after him. He was like, and he had got a big giant hole in the back of his head. Yeah. So anyway, let's get back to the paranormal stuff. Anybody that wants to know what's happening in Chicken Kingdom, that's what's happening in Chicken Kingdom. Now, let's get on to the good part, which is who I have for a guest. This gentleman has been here before, but it's been a few years. His name is Mike Ricksecker, and he is the author of the Amazon best-selling A Walk in the Shadows, A Complete Guide to Shadow People. He's also authored 8 historic paranormal books and the esoteric tome, Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. He has appeared on multiple television shows and programs as a paranormal historian, including Travel Channel's The Alaska Triangle, Discovery Plus's Fright Club, Animal Planet's The Haunted, Bio Channel's My Ghost Story, and Ren TV's, which is to Russia, Mysteries of Mankind. Mike also produces his own internet supernatural-based shows on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel, and is the producer and director of the docuseries The Shadow Dimension, available on several streaming platforms. On Tuesdays and Wednesday nights, he hosts the Edge of the Rabbit Hole live stream show and the Connecting Universe interactive class, respectively. Haunted Road Media is also his own paranormal and supernatural book publishing and video production company, representing a number of paranormal authors, winning the award for excellent media in the paranormal field at the 2019 Shockfest Film Festival. Mike's historic paranormal articles have been published in the Baltimore Sun, Paranormal Underground magazine, and he previously wrote an Oklahoma City paranormal column for Examiner from 2010 to 2014. His work has also been featured in the Oklahoman, the Frederick News Post, Marshall University's The Parthenon, and Louisiana State University's Civil War Book Review. He now hosts many of these articles along with informational videos and learning courses on the Connected Universe portal website. He's a native of Cleveland. He's also a U.S. Air Force veteran with a degree in simulation programming and is an avid baseball fan. Help me welcome him back. How are you doing tonight, Rick? I'm sorry, Mike.
Doing pretty well, Marlene. How are you? That's all right.
Good.
I'm doing pretty well, thanks.
I know everybody. I know because most of my audience knows I always ask my guests, how did you get interested in the paranormal? But I'll bring everybody up to speed, unless you want to tell a story that you had an encounter as a kid with, of all things, a shadow person.
Yeah, I can tell the story.
Yes.
My first significant paranormal experience, I was about 8 years old, and woke up in the middle of the night in my bedroom, and in the corner was this tall, dark figure. I had no idea that it was a shadow person or anything at that time. I was just a kid. I thought it was an intruder that was in the house and it was about to kill me. That's about what you think at that age. I was very scared, of course, and of course I'm still alive to tell the tale, which is great. But it did something really unusual. So I'm trying to scream, nothing's coming out of my mouth because I'm just too terrified. It came up to my bed, leans over. I'm looking up into this blank black face. There's just nothing there. And it grabbed me by the wrists, crossed my arms across my body, and then it ran off down the hall, and of all places into a closet. So I found my voice, found my legs, ran off screaming in my parents' bedroom. They tried to console me, told me that I just had a bad dream, but I knew I'd been awake for this whole thing.
Yes. Yeah. Man, let me tell you something. That scene is right out of a horror movie. Let me tell you. God.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. That's for sure.
That is like, did you ever have an encounter with this shadow person or shadow man again?
Well, not that specific one. I've had a lot of encounters with shadow entities over the years, but that particular shadow entity was only just that one time. And in that house, I would never call a haunted house either. That's like, there may have been one other paranormal experience that I had there, and I was even younger, so it's kind of harder to remember if it was real or something else. I lived there for 10 years, but that was like the big thing that happened there. And that was
the reason why I ask is I've heard of people that have kids have those encounters, but they it's almost like they get targeted. Like it's repetitive and they're like, oh my God, So I guess if you
Yeah,
want
you
to
know,
call it
when
lucky.
yeah, maybe lucky it was just a one-off. The one when I moved, we moved into a house after that. We moved from Massachusetts to Ohio, and in that house that I moved into, I did repeatedly see the same uh, shadow person over and over for several months. It
Wow.
eventually subsided and ended, but this one was I'm unpacking boxes, putting things away just after we first moved in, and I kept seeing this shadowy, more translucent type of a figure standing in the doorway of my bedroom. And whenever I turn and look at it, it would just go running off. And this happened over the course of several days to start with. Before I asked my mom, okay. And I was like 13 at the time, so I was a little bit older. And I told her, I keep seeing this thing standing in my doorway. And I described the whole thing. And she actually said that she had seen the same thing.
Okay.
So it was, great for me because it's like, okay, affirming what I had seen. She didn't think I was crazy. I'm not crazy. But she was really nonchalant about it. So I ended up getting playful with this thing. I called him Tom, like peeping Tom, because he'd always peep in my bedroom. And so
Wow.
I'd I'd be doing something and I'd see him saying there, "Hi, Tom," and he'd go running off. And yeah.
That's incredible. So let me ask you, do you think, I don't know, because you hear these stories about shadow people and that the feeling that people usually get from them is like very sinister or threatening. But it almost sounds like this wasn't the prototypical shadow person. Maybe, do you think it was an intelligent haunting
Well,
of somebody that couldn't just come in all the way?
yeah, the idea of and that happens where some of these shadowy entities are just human spirits that can't fully
Mm-hmm.
manifest, and that may be what this thing was. And there's kind of a misnomer in that all these shadow entities are dark, evil, sinister, that sort of thing. Some of them certainly are, but they are a lot of different things. And people ask me, okay, so what is a shadow person? And that's just like opening up a can of worms, because they can be so many different things. They can be a human spirit like that. They can be an interdimensional being. They can be an ET. They can be an extraterrestrial. Um, Sure, some of them can be demonic. Others can be actually light beings that our eyes can't see a certain that just can't see correctly. They could be astral projections. They could be a lot of different things. So it's not just a one and done. This is what a shadow person is.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are some that yeah, they're just a human spirit kind of passing through. Maybe they lived at that location and they're just there, and that's how they're able to manifest.
Right. And then you hear, of course, what they call like the hat, because I've heard of shadow people that are hooded. Then you hear the
Yep.
other ones that have a hat of some type. I've heard top hat, cowboy hat, hat. But they have that same thing where it's very dark and you really don't see any features, in other words.
Yeah, it's like a
Um,
silhouette. Yeah, you get a lot of the different style hats. It could be a fedora, a top hat. I've heard one tale of like an archer hat, like something out of Robin Hood, which is really
really?
bizarre. Yeah. So a lot of different styles.
I know that. And to me, because I've heard of people, and I'm thinking, of all the weird things that you would say, if anybody was going to, let's say, make up a story, it's like you put a hat on a thing. And I have spoken directly to people, and this was many years ago. This, these stories about shadow people and Hat Man and all this have become more common, maybe in the last 20, 15 years. But back in the 1980s, I had a conversation with a coworker who she told me she saw a shadow man with a top hat. And this was back in the 80s. And I
Yeah.
remember I was like, a guy with a top hat. I was like, that's weird. In her apartment, she was a young teenager. She woke up and he was at the foot of her bed. And many, many, many years later is when I was like, man, that story that she told me way back then, I hear other people saying the exact same thing.
Yeah,
You know,
it's not that it didn't happen back then. I mean, you're hearing more stories these days, and that's
right.
for a number of different reasons. Over the last 20, 25 years, we've had it started with the internet, where people were
Oh
connecting
yeah.
and sharing stories. And hey, I had this experience. I was in a smaller town in my later years when my interest in this phenomenon really started to grow. So there weren't a lot of people to talk to. The library didn't have a lot of books. Where could you possibly go? Then mid 90s really is when the World Wide Web started to take
Hmm.
off. and you start connecting on different forums and bulletin boards, Yahoo groups, places like that, finding that, hey, there are other people that have had these experiences. You start sharing these stories like that. And then late 90s, early 2000s, that's when you started seeing the paranormal television shows start to come out, which,
Yes.
I think was great, because then people realized, hey, it's becoming more mainstream. I've had these experiences too. I'm not alone. And it helped people to become more comfortable sharing their experiences and their stories. And so, because I'll also get that question, is this activity happening more because you're hearing more and more reports? It's like, well, you know, people have become more comfortable telling their stories, because it used to be so taboo to talk about
Right.
this thing, or people would think you were crazy. They might even throw you in
Mhm.
put you in a straitjacket and throw you in a
Yeah.
mental institution. That happened to people, but you don't really have
Mhm.
that fear so much anymore. Now it's kind of in vogue.
Yeah. Well, and see, this is the thing I tell. If even those early shows in the 90s, was In Search of, and all these, a lot of times they also did like historical homes or historical
Hmm.
properties that had, the Revolutionary War. It's like as we went into the reality shows that people started actually talking about their own personal, firsthand ghost encounters, like you said, because the stigma was not as bad anymore, that you could actually say, you know what, like with the story you just said, when I was growing up, I lived in this house, and for years I was having this experience, and this is what it was. Some of it, like you said, is it's not really scary. It's just like a little bit weird. And then other people talk about, like, man, by the time I turned 18, I left home because I couldn't take it anymore, because there was so much activity going on in my house that I couldn't take it. And you hear a lot of these, like you said, people are sharing more of their, and it's like now it's the worst. It's like you said, it's in vogue, and it's like, oh, so you're one of those too, huh? So everybody,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of people, even if they haven't seen it, they do believe that there is such a thing as life after death or ghosts, etc. There is that
Oh yeah,
belief in it.
absolutely. Yeah, I think you have more people than not that actually do believe in it.
Yes, yes. Even if they have not seen it, um, they kind of, and even the ones I think sometimes that are very skeptical, say, I don't believe it. I'm like, yeah, you just say that really. If I say it
Well,
enough, then it
yeah,
won't happen.
my dad is like that. He's like, I don't believe in any of that stuff. But there was this one time he'll launch into this story, and it's like, Dad, that's a
Yeah,
ghost story. You had a
yeah.
you had a supernatural experience. It's like, no, 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 no. It's
Yes, exactly. I have an aunt that's just like that. You talk to her and she's like, "Oh, that's BS," and blah blah blah. And like a few years ago, the family, she started telling the story about when she was a kid, she saw a ghost. And I was like, I looked at her and I like, you saw? She looked at me, oh no. And I go, but that was a ghost. You know that was. And then she was one of those, well, we won't talk about that anymore. It's like, you know. So yeah, I know that a lot of people that the harder they protest, what is it? Thou protest too loudly or something like that.
right, exactly.
And anyway, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, I know that you've been doing that show as far as Alaska, and we were commenting right before we started to record that, I mean, you always hear these things about Alaska, but a lot of weird things happen in Alaska just by
Yeah.
itself. They have a lot of, besides the disappearances, I didn't realize that there were have so many, I don't want to say cryptids, but stories of weird beings, you
Yeah,
know?
there's a lot of stuff going on in Alaska. You mentioned the disappearances, 16,000 people since 1988, which is a
That's a
lot,
lot.
especially considering how sparsely populated the state is. And sure, some of those are people that just wandered off the path
Yeah.
somewhere and got eaten by a bear. That happens, or people that wanted to get lost. That happens
Yes.
too. But it's an inordinate amount of people that just. I mean, one of the stories is that it was the Mount Marathon race, and you know the guy ran up the hill and he just never came back down. They never found him. Yeah, it was like, where did he
So
go? Yeah.
I had not heard that. I mean, I've heard of these people, that disappear, like you said, the 411 missing, all these people that go into the national parks, but I had never heard of somebody doing a race and it's just, where'd he go?
Yeah, poof, gone. Yeah, it's bizarre, and like you said, the cryptid encounters that they have up there, between you have a lot of different Sasquatch type
Right.
beings that are up there, Bigfoot. You have what they call the hairy man, which is another type. The Alaskan Bushman. So all these different types. It's a Kushataka, which is the otter man. So he's kind of almost like half man, half otter sort of thing, which is one of the old native legends.
Right.
You have the Lake Iliamna lake monster, which is kind of like their Loch Ness monster. So you have a lot of these different
What is
creatures up there.
Have you heard of this guy? There's a town. I want to say it's in Alaska. It's called, was it Portlock or
Portlock?
something?
Yeah.
The
It's
one
two
that
different names: Portlock or Port Chatham. Yeah.
And I had heard about it, and then I looked into it, and I think it was I think they had a cannery on there. That's just like the little village. And from what I understand, they were getting attacked. They had a Bigfoot supposedly was attacking some of the people that lived there. I mean, it was a small place, but it was like, wow, that's unusual.
Yeah, that was the Port Chatham hairy man. So
yes,
you didn't want to venture out into the woods too far because he would get you, and they would find these like severed limbs, just out in the woods, or they would wash up on shore, and some people would try to pass it off as like, oh, it was a bear attack, but when you actually had the medical examiners come in and look at it, it's like, well, there's no claw marks, so
right.
it wasn't a bear, and so people became frightened, and the cannery ended up shutting down. It was a small village. Now it's a ghost town. There's nobody there now. It essentially was done by the 1950s.
Right, but I heard also that even hunters, after a while, it was like you said, after dark, even hunters were like, they were hesitant, and little by little, just people were refusing to live their life, for lack of a better word. Even though they had worked there, they just eventually just moved away. And I think to myself, that's, I mean, you could think, well, some people could be scared off, but for a bunch, basically a whole town that's has work there to often just forget it. We're out of here. That tells me that there had to be something going on. Yeah,
especially when you're talking about a fish cannery, which, I mean, the fish industry there is amazing. It's phenomenal, and you end up with this huge salmon and all this stuff up there, which is just it's delicious. So it's a booming staple up there, and then all of a sudden you like you said, you're abandoning the cannery, which their business wise, there's no reason why. There's no reason why to abandon it, business wise, because if fishing is a huge industry up there, but they were just getting scared off.
Yeah. Let me ask you, have you heard of something? And I read about this in Alaska, something that's called the specter moose. Okay. And supposedly it's a moose that looks white, but it's not really white. It's and it's not an albino. It's just born with the fur's grayish, which makes it look white. And I think supposedly, and it's not a cryptid in the sense of like, but supposedly if you sight it, it's like like if you see it, something bad's going to happen. I don't know if you had come across that story. I had come across it very recently.
I've heard of stories like that before. I never encountered.
Right. And it's apparently it's a rare animal in and of itself. So that supposedly when it's sighted, it's like, I can't remember.
Yeah, because it's so unusual. It's like a harbinger of whatever.
Right. So, I want to say there was one of the last times, it was a while back, but it was right before some type of something erupted there. It was like, it's like great timing.
Yeah, but, when I first showed up to Alaska in the early 90s, Mount Spur had just erupted right across the Cook Inlet from where I was stationed. So there was still like ash falling down out of the sky. Wow. All kinds of crazy stuff.
Let me tell you, isn't that crazy? I don't know. I've lived in Florida all my life, and people say, how can you live in a place where you could get a hurricane? But I'm like, you know what? You at least can leave if you want to.
Right.
But I'm thinking of these places with earthquakes and volcanoes. That's crazy.
Yeah, at least with a volcano, there are some signs that, we're coming up to an eruption. But with an earthquake, you have no idea.
No.
And I experienced several while I was up there.
One of the things that also, and one of the, I want to say, you hear all these stories about Bigfoot all over the United States. Every area's got some version of their Bigfoot or Sasquatch. But it seems like the ones in Alaska, for some reason, appear to be more aggressive or more territorial. Like, in other words, if you cross paths with some of these, it's like, I've heard of people like their cars being found and that's it. No more person.
Yeah, yeah, and it's especially like the hairy man is a more aggressive one. I mean, there's some just like regular,
Mm-hmm.
standard basic Sasquatch sightings, but others where there's some sort of like damage that's been done or what have you. And again, it is not attributed to something like a bear because there's no claw marks, or you end up with the big footprints and things like that as well.
Do they have any of the? I was always curious because I'm always interested, these mining ghost towns. And I know in Alaska, like in the Yukon, do they have any, I want to say ghost towns like that from any of the mining camps that used to be up
Oh
there?
yeah, yeah. The Killicott copper mine was, it was a huge mine like 100 years ago. Fantastic tales of how they had to build the railroad there because they're building the tracks across glaciers, and the glaciers would move, so they'd
Wow.
always have to go back and adjust the tracks. And they, you see some of those like crazy movies or cartoons where they have like the railroad tracks like hanging right off the mountain like that. No,
Uh-huh.
it was actually like that up there for this copper mine to get the goods back and
Wow.
forth. And yeah, there are tales of the hauntings up there. One of the interesting ones is that the headstones of the old graveyard, like you can walk up the path to go visit the ruins of the old mining town, and you'll see the headstones
Mm.
sitting there, and then as you walk back down, the headstones are gone.
What?
Yeah. They're just disappearing
Okay.
headstones. Yeah. So all kinds of interesting things like that. And you'll see like, phantom rail cars, and then, some of the
Mm-hmm.
miners and things like that. Like when they were putting up a housing development in that area, the construction crew was reporting seeing the old miners. They would have tools go missing, just,
Okay. Yeah.
right off his tool belt and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Because that's what I hear. A lot of these mining camps, people, I mean, but people died. Talk about violent death and sudden. That mining work was very dangerous in a lot of different ways. So in some cases, you have what they call that recipe for an intelligent haunting, where violent death, well, I don't want to say unexpected because obviously if you're a miner, but still. And even amongst themselves, some of these mining camps, they were kind of brutal as far as people did away with each other, for to stake a
Oh yeah.
claim, things of that nature.
Oh yeah. There were
Um,
a lot of those deaths up there were unreported.
yes,
Absolutely.
yes, yeah, but it's not like now that everybody knows everything that everybody's doing. People would show up there from other parts of the country,
Oh yeah.
and they
It
would
was.
just.
Yeah, you had a lot of it was a very transient type of culture there, especially like 100 years ago, because like you mentioned with the Yukon, um, the Yukon's actually in Canada, but
Oh, I'm
you
sorry.
have to. No, it's fine because it's right on the edge of Canada and Alaska, but people traveling there would come up the waterways into Alaska and then
Mhm.
move on into the Yukon area that way. And so what would end up happening is so many stories like this. It became like a Wild West town, but in the north. So
Yeah.
so prospectors would come in, they'd stay at the old hotels and bordellos and things like that. You have these interesting stories of, guy and his wife or guy and his girlfriend show up there. He goes off, to try to strike it rich with the gold rush, and the woman would stay behind, would run out of money, would end up having to work at the bordello. The gentleman would come back, find that his wife or girlfriend is now working the bordello. He'd murder her there. So you have all these
Oh,
hauntings there
yes.
that are,
Yeah.
and it's you see so many stories like that are very very similar at all these different old inns and saloons and hotels and things like that.
Yeah, people don't realize if for women there was not much you could do, and as a matter of fact, and they say that so many people stream from that. Sometimes you have people that you never knew their real names. Like let's say they were Red Eyed Tom, whatever. You never knew really what his true name was. As a matter of fact, I think even and this was in the Yukon. Wyatt Earp even went out there when they struck gold, and he had a mine out there called the Sore Finger. So when these places, people would come from all over, and there were the people that would make money from the miners, which is selling them stuff, but you had a lot of different people with different backgrounds, and that's to put it nicely. And that's why I think a lot of these mining camps, it's inescapable that there's some type of haunting attached to them. But that one about the graveyard, It's like, wow,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, you have a lot of
so.
interesting tales up there.
Yes, you do. You do. They also have a thing going on with UFOs as well. It's like, wow.
Oh yeah,
I mean, they
yeah, a
have
lot of UFO sightings up there.
a lot of UFO sightings. So let me ask you. I know that you've done several books. What was the last one that you put out that you published?
Yeah, the last one was Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. So on
Oh,
everything we were just
okay,
talking about, it
okay,
came out back in October. So yeah, we just had season 2 of the Alaska Triangle television show, which came out beginning of September, and I was trying to hurry up and get that book out in time in the second season, which
okay.
I got it out in the middle of the season. So I was happy to finally get that published. But yeah, Alaska's Mysterious Triangle, and then just before that was A Walk in the Shadows, a complete guide to shadow people and all the
Hmm.
shadow phenomenon, which led to my docu-series, The Shadow Dimension, which if anybody wants to watch that and get like real in-depth on shadow phenomena, that is running free on Tubi TV right now.
On where?
Tubi TV.
On Tubi? Okay, perfect.
Hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
So if they go on Tubi, what should they look for as far as to
Just
search
look
for?
for the Shadow Dimension.
The shadow dimension. Okay,
Yep.
okay. And well, and that Alaska Triangle, that's almost equivalent a little bit like what I've heard, like to the Bermuda Triangle, where
Yeah.
just weird stuff happens. People in airplanes experience, from what I understand, their instruments going crazy. And that's where also they have a lot of these disappearances of planes and just,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you end up with a lot of the strange, missing airplanes, all kinds of crazy things going on with ships up there. So yeah, you have these different triangle areas of the world. Everybody's familiar with the Bermuda Triangle. The
Hmm.
Alaska Triangle's a big one. You have like the Dragon Triangle out in Japan, which that one
Right by Japan.
dates far before the Bermuda Triangle. Like the Bermuda Triangle, we coined that term back in the 1940s, and it's strange. And people have been noticing strange experiences there for decades, and even as far back as like Christopher Columbus. But Dragon Triangle out there near Japan, you had strange things going on out there as far back as Kublai Khan, the son of
Okay.
Genghis Khan.
Hmm.
So that far back, where he's bringing 40,000 troops through there for an invasion, and just all of a sudden they all go down. Yeah.
Right. I heard something that's why they were unable to conquer Japan, basically,
Yeah.
as far as what they intended to do.
Yeah.
And
So
this was people, they had the Mongols had basically like swept all of
mhm.
Asia. So
Yeah, the Japanese government has actually back in the 1950s designated that area as basically no shipping zone. You do not want to travel
really,
through there because of all the bizarre things that happen within that. So yeah, you have these different areas like that throughout the world, and in Alaska, you have this massive area with basically what it comes down to is the magnetic properties within those areas. You have these vortices that develop, so that welling up of energy from the Earth's magnetic core, and it
uh-huh.
spawns off. It spawns off portals. You have, like you're talking about, the
Right.
instrumentation problems because of the strange magnetism that's going on there. And in Alaska, it's even exacerbated even more because the magnetic shielding of the Earth is actually thinner up there, which is why
Okay.
you end up seeing the aurora borealis and things like that up there because of the solar wind with the protons and electrons hitting off the ionosphere, and the magnetic protection is thinner. So you see all those wonderful colors, but that's more you have more things interacting with the magnetism of the Earth right there, and so that helps to spur some things. That's why things like harp uh
Mm-hmm.
were built up
Something that,
there. Yeah.
right. Do you, that you mentioned that thing with the portal. Do you think that sometimes that accounts for like what you were talking about, that runner that he just like just totally is gone,
Yeah,
and
the
accounts for some of these
disappearances.
disappearances?
Absolutely. Yeah, some of these people could be disappearing into portals and other dimensions. One of the yeah, there's so many disappearing planes up
Hmm.
there, but one from 1950, which was a Douglas Skymaster, flies uh, out of Elmendorf Air Force Base, uh, and it's pretty much a beautiful day. A few scattered clouds, but everything's going fine. And then all of a sudden, as it crosses the Canadian border, boom, it's gone. And it's never found again. They ended up, thousands and thousands of people out there, scouring the land,
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of, planes flying around trying to find where, because they're thinking it crashed, it went down somewhere.
Right.
But nothing. And there was a smaller plane that went down in the same area, like weeks later. They were able to find that plane like that. But here's
Mm-hmm.
this huge Douglas Skymaster, nothing. Where did it go? One of the interesting things is that they did catch some garbled radio chatter not long after, which they think may have come from the Douglas Skymaster, but they could never confirm it. So one of the running theories is that the plane disappeared into the portal, or a
Right.
portal, and the radio chatter, because sound works on a different wavelength, was able to be heard coming through there, at least for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it makes
So,
you wonder,
and
where did they end up at, huh?
right, exactly. Where did they end up at? And that leads me into other ideas of things that go on in Alaska. So if they went through a portal, where did they go? Sure, they could have gone into another dimension. They could have gone to another place in time as well. And so,
Okay.
let's say, okay, if they went back in time, they could go forward in time too. But let's say they went back in time, we'll throw a number out there, 500 years ago. Okay, we'll just say that's our theoretical idea. If that happened, what would that look like to the natives up there at that time? They see this huge Douglas Skymaster going overhead. It's very loud. It's got the exhaust and everything coming off of it. To me, this could be some of our Thunderbird legends of old.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. You took the words out of my mouth. How would they don't like you said, we're talking 500. They don't understand something mechanical. They're immediately going to assume that it's an animal or a monster or something.
Exactly. Yeah, it's completely out of context for them. It's in the air. There are large birds. So, perhaps it becomes some of these different Thunderbird legends. Maybe that's where some of them come from.
Right. And that makes you think, do they assimilate and have to live out their days 500 years before?
Are we eventually going to find them under the ice, and the dating of it's going to be really weird, because it's like, wait a minute, these are the guys from
somebody does a DNA sample and they're like, hey, it's incredible, and because of the freezing temperatures there, corpses, I from what I understand, they get preserved very well for a very long time.
They can, yeah. It's really fascinating. They will find, ancient natives up there, almost like mummified in the ice. They'll find animals up there, like the woolly mammoths. They'll find those mammoths whole up there in the ice, and they're actually talking about bringing back the woolly mammoths.
I know. I heard that they had found some so fresh, I guess you want, that they were thinking, cloning it, or something like a Jurassic Park scenario kind of thing.
It's kind of a Jurassic Park scenario. They have to, because the DNA is broken down enough where they can't completely clone a woolly mammoth, but they're talking about crossing it with some elephant DNA.
Right.
And so there's this real strange mix in the scientific community where, some people are like, let's do it. Let's bring back the woolly mammoths. And others are like, well, it's not really going to be a true woolly mammoth. It's going to be, this hairy elephant with some extra fat deposits. So
and its time came and went, and it's, and it's not like you have enough specimens that you can't study it.
Yeah. And some of them are also saying, well, there's a reason why the woolly mammoths died out. If, we reintroduce them into the environment, is whatever killed them off the first time, is that still within those DNA strands, and we'll just do the same thing again. So
I
don't know. But there's also people who believe.
Go ahead.
And there's some people who also believe that there are some woolly mammoths still out there in the wild, in the wilderness. Alaska's massive. There are areas of that we truly have not explored yet, because the state is so massive. And so it's almost like, with Sasquatch, the idea of there are small pockets of them, out there in the wilderness. And so some people believe that the woolly mammoth may also have some small pockets out there. And so I threw the question out there in my Alaska Triangle book, Alaska's Mysterious
Right.
Triangle. So what happens if we reintroduce, our hybridized, woolly mammoth into, the environment, and there are some other, true woolly mammoths out there and they breed? What are we going to end up with?
Well, I've even heard that they have belief that even dire wolves, that there's belief that there's some, of course, very remote areas always.
Yeah.
And I hear also in Siberia and Russia, they always find some weird stuff every once in a while under their, because I think they're frozen all the time. But I wouldn't be surprised. But then you think about it, elephants, modern elephants, they exist in very hot, humid temperatures. That's their natural environment. Whereas these animals were basically living in an ice age. So how well is it going to, it'd be a weird, but still, there's always, I think there's all of us after Jurassic Park, there's people like are wondering, what if, what will become, what will happen?
Yeah, it's that whole, just because we can doesn't mean we should. But
right.
I think there's something to be learned from the process of learning how genetics work, because at some point we're going to have to, and I know this scares people, but at some point we're going to have to look into how do we modify ourselves for things like space travel, because we're eventually going to have to stretch out into the universe, because this planet is not always going to be here. And that's not just in the sense of, humans doing things to destroy it. At some point, the sun is going to become a red giant and, destroy the planet. I mean, sure, it's not going to be for billions of years, but it is going to happen. So at some point we need to stretch out into the universe. And so we might need to look into how might we end up needing to change our genetics to, have extended space travel, live on another planet and things like that. So there's something to be learned from the
gravity
process.
pulls. Let's say, let's go with Mars. Mars is the closest thing, as far as, even though we're discovering a lot of different things. But yes, I understand him. Even though, I have heard the dark side of this is like you hear, these labs with the CRISPRs and tweaking genetics. And I've even heard of human animal hybrids. You don't know how much truth is it, or is this just like somebody thinking, there's a mad scientist in the lab going, whoa, I'm gonna, I'm gonna try to make a, Island of Dr. Moreau kind of thing.
Right. There's already interesting things that they're doing, like, if you can believe this, crossing spider DNA with goats, so that within goat milk there are goats, so that in the goat milk they actually get the silk from the spiders in their spider webs, and it creates a very high tensile type of material. So we're already doing crazy things like that.
This was I want to say like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. One time I was talking to a priest, and the conversation came up because there's a university I went to a Catholic high school, and it's a Catholic university. And we got to talking because I hadn't been by there for a while, and he teaches there. And he tells me, no, I'm teaching bioethics. And I said, yeah, well, what is that about? And he goes, well, that's about things that people shouldn't do just because they can. And he was basically talking about the medical, genetic stuff, like things that even if you can, you shouldn't ethically. I said, but is that really happening? He goes, not in this country, but there's a lot of labs in other countries where they don't have, they don't like look over your shoulder so much, where, they're doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing with the genetics and animals and animal human, kind of like, let's see what happens if we do that. I was like, oh God, I don't know. That's, you hear that and you're thinking always it's just science fiction, but unfortunately, sometimes there's more to it than that.
No, there are people out there in this world in their own, secret labs doing things like that. Yep.
Yes, exactly. And then, we could go in the other direction, and, as far as robotics and humans, and that's a whole nother show. But
a lot of that is coming.
Yeah. Let me ask you with the as far as the ghost stories, I know, are you doing anything local to where you're at right now, as far as any sites that you've been going to?
Yeah, I mean, I have different events that I do. I mean, it's right now it's the middle of winter, so I'm
Oh,
not
I'm
really
sorry.
getting out
Yeah, okay.
anywhere.
Ah,
Um, but yeah, I have right down the road is the site that I mean, Ohio's a pretty haunted city. We got stuff all over the place, but a favorite of mine right down the road is the site that's known as the quote unquote Gore Orphanage, which um,
okay.
you know the urban legend is that there was an orphanage run by old man Gore, and he was very mean. He locked the kids in at night, and one day, the place caught on fire. He left them locked in their rooms while he ran out, and they all died. Which is not true. That's the urban
I was
legend.
about to ask you, is there any truth to this? I know a lot of these things when you
The,
research them, it's like, man,
yeah,
that's totally fabricated.
it there are elements of it that are pulled from different areas to kind of create this thing. So the building in question was actually never an orphanage. It was known as the Swift Mansion. It was a very beautiful home, kind of down in this ravine along the river, uh, and it became abandoned in the late 1800s. Built in the 1860s by a very wealthy investor. He ended up
Oh
losing
my
his
God, wait a
money.
minute. The Gore Mansion. Wait, keep going because I want to tell you a ghost story I
Okay,
heard. All of a sudden, when you
sure.
said Gore, I was like, wait a minute, but keep going. Yes.
Okay. So he ended up losing his money. They sold it to another
Okay.
family. There was a tragedy there with that particular family in which the grandchildren uh, had all died within a few days of each other with diphtheria. Like within the span of 7 days, all
Oh,
four of the
God,
grandchildren
yeah.
had passed away. The grandmother is the grandparents that lived at the house. The children didn't actually live there,
Okay.
but uh, the woman of the house, the grandmother, she basically lost it when that happened, and so she was into spiritualism. So she had some seances and things like that at the house. She started putting out place settings for the grandchildren, things like that. A few years down the road, they moved from there. The house became abandoned. Nobody else moved into it. This is the late
Okay.
1890s. It was years later, almost 10 years later, that up the hill, the Orphanage of Light and Hope uh, came into being. And so that's where the orphanage was. It was not actually this building down
Oh,
there. They
so they
actually,
kind of like, oh, I
yeah.
see.
So it's like you're starting to see it's starting to merge together here. So they did own the land in the house where of that Swift mansion, but
Mm-hmm.
they didn't use it for anything. They wanted the field back behind there for farming. The kids, I imagine, played within there because you know you have to pass by it up and down the hill all the time. So of course they're probably going to go inside and play around at some point. But
Right.
they lived in the buildings up the hill. Now the people who ran the orphanage, the Sprungers, they were very mean. They were actually brought to trial for the abuses that they put
Really?
on the children. Yeah, and that orphanage eventually was shut down in 1916. All the while, down below, along the river, that old mansion is still there. It did actually burn down in 1921. It'd been abandoned for 25 years. Nobody was in it at the time. Children did not perish or die within it. um,
Okay.
Now there was a fire around that time within a few years, uh, sort of in the area, the Collinwood fire, which was a school. And
Okay.
back then we didn't have fire regulations, so there was really only one exit for them to try to get out of the building. It was really sad because it was over 100 children who perished in that fire. I think it was like
Oh my God.
172 or something like that, if I recall correctly. So yeah, it was a very, very tragic with all these children that perished in this fire,
Yeah.
sort of in the area. So it's
Okay. Mike, if you can hear me, I can't hear you. You froze on me. Darn it. Let's see.
I see you. Okay,
Okay.
can you
All
hear
right.
me?
Keep going.
Okay.
You're back.
Where did that leave off before
You
cut out?
the kids, a bunch of kids, they died. Like 70 something
Yeah,
children died in the fire.
it was like 172 children died in the fire, the Collinwood school fire, which was sort of in the area around that time. So you kind of see all these different elements that come together to create this story of this abandoned building. And so, over the years, this legend grew up. One of the things that kind of hurt or kind of aided in the story is that the road along there is called Gore Orphanage Road, but it was never
Oh,
called Gore Orphanage. The problem is that the road was originally named Gore Road, and
okay.
when the orphanage up the hill, the Orphanage of Light and Hope, came into being, they just appended the name orphanage onto it so that people that were familiar with Gore Road know it's Gore Road. People that were looking for the orphanage knew this was the road to go to the orphanage. But over time, people just thought it must have been named Gore Orphanage, but it never was.
And because people don't realize, people back then, people, that's the way they named it. It was nothing, it wasn't official. It was like, yeah, Gore Orphanage over there. Yeah. Before
Yeah,
you know it,
that's
it's stuck.
Gore. The orphanage is there down Gore Road. So it just, they mishmashed it together.
That's that the orphanage, what was it, the name, the Orphanage of Light and Hope? God.
Yeah. Yeah, the Orphanage of Light and Hope, which was not, because they were, again,
No,
very
I was like,
abusive.
man, if let me tell you something, for an orphanage back then to be shut down, it must have been horrific.
Oh, it
Because
was. Yeah, they were having like 15 kids use the same bath water.
God.
The types of food that they were eating was just like horrific, and because they were malnourished and just
Hmm.
crazy stuff. So yeah, it was terrible.
No, by the way, I just remembered the Gore Mansion, which I'm thinking about. It's in Massachusetts. That's why I was going Gore, Gore, Gore.
Oh, okay, okay.
And it was like, no, I was like, no, this doesn't sound right. And they have one in Massachusetts where there was a sighting. There was a pond. It's a haunted pond. And I was going to ask you, hey, is there a haunted pond there? That back in the 1890s, they were doing work, and part of the work the workmen had to do was drag the pond. Supposedly, they saw an owner that was dead come out of the boathouse and row his rowboat
Oh,
on
wow.
the pond, and a bunch of workmen quit. So they got another bunch, and they kind of like didn't hear the story, and the second one's quit because they saw the same thing. So it's things like that. And it
Well,
makes you wonder, what
uh,
was he doing out there in the middle of the pond?
yeah, really. But I'll tell you how this is how abusive the Gore Orphanage was. There was one boy who managed to run away,
Okay.
and when they put him on the stand, because he was called on to testify, he said that he ran away to get an education because they weren't teaching him any there. Now imagine that somebody runs away so that a kid runs away so he can go to school. What kid runs to school?
Yeah, because that says volumes.
Yeah,
Because a lot of there was a even if it wasn't government sponsored, a lot of charities would give to these orphanages. Like women's groups. Everybody felt sorry for orphans, so God knows how much money they were taking in and obviously not using it for the kids. And people, that's what I'm saying. You hear about some orphanages that were pretty bad, but they left them alone because at the end of the day, people saw it as, okay, they're taking these orphans in. So if for
right.
an orphanage to actually be shut down, that speaks volumes, right? And in those years is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Back in
yeah,
those
especially
years
back then.
where,
Yeah,
it's not like now where it was like, okay, well, poor kid, he's an orphan or whatever. Just like those poor farms that they had where,
yep,
if for whatever reason you didn't have a place to live, you would end up there. Oh,
yeah, at an almshouse or a par farm or what have you. Yeah,
that. So let me ask you. So, you said the orphanage burnt down, but the Gore
yeah.
house is
So
still there.
yeah, the well, the Swift Mansion down there at along the river there burned down.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the buildings from the orphanage, I know that the one little building is still there. The others are pretty much gone. There's a couple of the interesting thing is, right, this one house is at the top of the hill where the boys' dormitory used to be, and they
Okay.
knocked that down, built another house there. They have a couple of pillars along the driveway, which we were actually dragged up from the Swift mansion, because I have old photos of that mansion. Here are these, basically pillars that go like along the side of the driveway or whatever, kind of mark the property.
Okay.
And they're actually up the hill now. So at some point, those kids were asked to drag that up there. But the ruins of the mansion are still there. Like, you can go there. The foundation is still there. Some of the old tiles, the old well is still there. So that's kind of, you can go down into that area, and if you know who it is, you're actually trying to talk to, which would be the Swift family or the Wilbur family, which is the name of the family that moved in after the fact. If you go down there to talk to them, you can get some interesting interaction there around that old foundation.
Oh, really? So in other words, what do people go out there, try to do EVPs or just capture stuff or what?
Yeah, they'll do a lot of stuff like that. Unfortunately, you get a lot of kids that go down there and drink and
yes, I was gonna say
yeah,
and you get your regular legend trippers or and then you have and do people report anything having to do with children?
Well, yeah, that's where some of the crazy legends come into place. Is people say, "Oh, I saw a child running around on fire," which goes back to the old.
Okay.
Like, no. No, they don't really get the children down there.
Okay.
Who you'll get down there is like basically like the Wilbur family. If the grandmother who kind of lost her mind a little bit there.
When she had all the kids die. All right.
Yeah, when her grandchildren died. So you can get some interaction with her and a couple of others from the family. Yeah.
Interesting.
So what is interesting, you will get like a lot of footsteps around that area. So like, people walking in and around the foundation area. So that's pretty interesting.
Right. And I tell people sometimes these places are interesting to go to, but it's really difficult. I don't know how popular it is, but if you've got other people walking around with too much ambient noise, you kind of lose any chance of getting anything that, was that noise? Was that, somebody walking around on the other side or?
Right. Unfortunately, this area is a lot more quiet because it's actually part of a park. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the grounds around it are part of a park. Interesting.
Yeah, the grounds around it are part of a park. I mean, there are people, down along the river. Normally, by the one bridge was a bit down the road. There'll be some guys fishing down there, and then up the road, which I keep saying, up the hill. It's an abandoned road. They blocked off the road to get from the top of the hill down because there's a huge storm during the 1960s that that basically damaged the roads, kind of falling in, down the hill into the river, and they just decided not to repair it because it was going to cost too much in maintenance. So when you walk up there, it's really like kind of walking along the side of the cliff because half the road is gone. It's down the hill. The old guardrail is down there. You're like, hey, there's a guardrail down there. Yeah. So that's kind of crazy. But and again, it's another thing with crazy urban legends where the story is that they blocked off the road because kids that were drinking down there at the old ruins were terrorizing motorists.
So but you know what? Anything is possible. But you know what? You know why I asked you that, Mike? Because sometimes people that live in an area know about the local haunted places. Stuff that you don't hear about unless you speak to somebody that lives in that area.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I did. Because I'd go out there quite a bit. I'm posting, videos and things like that on my YouTube channel. And so I was getting in touch with, a number of the locals that had lived there a while or people that had done some of the research into it. And we kind of, had some back and forth. And, and that's where I started getting some of the information about, well, no, that road was closed down because of the storm. It was a wild storm. It was, you talked about hurricanes earlier. It was, I mean, we're off of, we're in Ohio. We don't get hurricanes here, but we do have Lake Erie up there. And it was 4th of July back in the 1960s. I want to say 67 or 68. And it was a massive storm that suddenly came up out of nowhere off the lake and the winds had gotten so fierce that people that were down at the park waiting for the the fireworks and everything to go off, they were actually being picked up off the ground because of this wind. So it ruined that 4th of July, and it was that storm that damaged that road, that part of Gore Orphanage Road that has been shut down ever since.
Because people don't realize that sometimes, I know what you're saying. Everybody thinks of like hurricanes or tornadoes as being destructive, but if you get a bad enough storm, it will like do that type of damage. And back in 2000, I don't know if you've ever heard of this. I want to say like 2000. God, it was 2008, 2009. I went to Marblehead over there in Sandusky, right on the lake, and they had a place where they used to have a Civil War prison for Southern prisoners. God, what's the name of it? Now I can't remember. I was wondering if you had ever heard of it, because they were saying there were hauntings there because they kept Confederate soldiers there as prisoners. And the last I heard was they had, you know how they keep like rolls of who's being kept prisoners.
Right.
But at one point they did like, they basically go over the ground, and they found so many other graves beyond the borders of the cemetery for the prisoners, that they were saying that there was a lot of the records. In other words, it didn't tally up with supposedly the ones that were buried versus who was there.
Yeah, you don't know. A lot of those records are really incomplete, and they were not giving the right numbers back then.
Right. And a lot of people, and it's surprising because people don't, people are very familiar with the one in Georgia, which I think it was Andersonville, it's one of the Civil War, prisoner camps. But this one in Ohio, I was surprised, and not till I went there and they had the cemetery, was I aware that they had this, the other way where they kept Confederate prisoners. And of course, like you said, the winters there were so harsh, and they kept a lot of them, they weren't kept warm. How's that?
Right.
And that's
unfortunately a lot of those guys perished. And another interesting prison was there in Alton, Illinois, which I've been around that area, done a lot of research in that area for several years. And the prison that was used there for the Civil War, well, they had a smallpox epidemic. And so there was this island out in the Mississippi River that it was called a lot of different things. Mosquito Island because it got a lot of mosquitoes. Sunflower Island because there were a lot of sunflowers on there. They ended up also calling it Smallpox Island because they quarantined the smallpox, the people that contracted smallpox, onto that island from the prison. When they died, they buried them on the island. Well, years later, they wanted to put in a dam right there, and they were, they obliterated the island, forgetting about all the people that were buried there. And they ended up, digging all these bodies up. And for years, people downstream, just like, guys fishing off the river, they're all of a sudden, a bone or a skull or whatever would suddenly pop up for years later. So
I can imagine, hey, I've got something on my line. Wait.
Yeah. It's like, there's a monument there now, but it's like, but
people
what
don't
did you
realize
do with
back
all
then,
the bones?
With, when you have a pestilence, you were lucky if you got buried. They had a lot of those mass burial sites. There was it was just, people were afraid of contagion with good reason. So they were quick to bury people, and it was just put them in there, dig a pit and put them in there and just bury them because it was a lethal disease back then. And I heard there's one of those, what was it? North Brother Island over there, and right next to New York, had something similar along the same lines, where at some point they were sending people that were contagious, like Typhoid Mary was kept over there.
Oh, okay.
Same thing. Because you needed a ferry basically to get off the island, and they said there were some burials that were they were logged, and then there was others that was like things like that. So a lot of those places that I would say that there's a good chance that there's some type of haunting going on, or at least something interesting that you could pick up on.
Oh, for sure.
So what projects do you have planned for 2022?
2022. Yeah, I have a lot of things going on right now. I'm finishing up on the audiobook for Alaska's Mysterious Triangle, so that'll be out on audio here pretty soon. Then I have to, uh, right now in audio, I have the first edition for A Walk in the Shadows that's out. I have a second edition of the written book. I need to do the audiobook for that. So that'll be after I finish the audiobook for Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. The Shadow Dimension is getting a season 2. So
Okay.
that is a project that is underway. We also have a Ancient Mysteries of Ireland tour coming up in July. We only have 4 tickets left.
Wow. Okay, folks,
yeah.
if you're hearing this, go for it quick.
Yeah, it's July 1st through the 9th. So
Yes.
you want to jump on that because, again, only 4 tickets left. So we're doing a lot of different haunted castles. We're doing
Oh, wow.
the different stone circles. Got some haunted distilleries in there. So, yeah, a lot of cool stuff.
Can you imagine pub crawl in Ireland?
And speaking of, yeah, it's going to be amazing. Speaking of prisons, we also have for an entire night just to ourselves, Spike Island, which is basically Ireland's Alcatraz. And so we have that whole island, the whole prison to ourselves for a night. Yeah.
Where do people go to find out about this trip?
So you can go to my website right now. You'll see the banner on the side there for Ancient Mysteries of Ireland, and that'll take you to all the information, how to sign up and all that stuff.
All right. And for my podcast listeners, your website, even though I'll put in the credits of the show.
Yeah, MikeRicksecker.com.
Okay. All right. And so there they can jump. They've got a link where they can jump and
Yep.
That sounds like a fabulous trip. And I'm telling everybody, July is around the corner. Everybody thinks, no, you don't have time.
It's going to come up quick.
Time. It is. It is. Mike, it has been wonderful to speak to you. Let me tell you something. It definitely sounds like you've been a busy guy and you're going to stay a busy guy. And let me tell you, that trip to Ireland, I got to have you come back because I imagine that's going to be really interesting. It's inevitable. Somebody's going to have some type of experiences.
Oh, there'll definitely be experiences. I mean, we're Lep Castle, we're doing investigation at. Yeah.
Let me tell you something. That Lep Castle, believe it or not, that non-human, whatever it is running around there, elemental.
It's like, elemental.
What?
Yeah.
What? I mean, we'll get the lowdown on the that thing for a long time.
Yeah.
All right.
Hundreds of years.
Yes, but even as far as they've even had in the 1920s and 30s, people that supposedly they were having weird encounters with whatever that thing is, which is God. It's a sheep or whatever.
It's something crazy. Yeah.
Oh, that is great. Again, thank you so much, Mike. It has been absolutely wonderful to speak to you. Take care. Happy New Year and the best of luck on all your projects.
Happy New Year.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow. Jeez. Oh, that last one. That sounds like a great trip. Wow. See, that's the kind of stuff that you you take up a camera, a backup camera, a backup to the backup camera. All right. Lots of batteries, lots of things. I mean, this is I'll just pack jeans, t-shirts, a jacket, but plenty of recording, whatever it is you've got going on. Because there's got to be plenty there. And a lot of micro cards, SD micros and whatever, memory sticks, whatever. It's something to hold all your stuff in. It's next. Wow, that's a great trip. Let me tell you something. See, before we started rolling, I told him, you always hear stuff going on in Alaska, but back in, was it 2018? I had spoken to a gentleman by the name of Bjorn Dila. As a matter of fact, you've seen him in some of the shows having to do with Alaska. And what he does if people want to take a hunting trip or go out there, he's not a scout or a tracker, but basically he takes you out there. And he was the first one that started telling me some of these stories that I was like, all this is going on in Alaska? That's really out there. And he confirmed, he spoke about some of the things, but yeah, Alaska is very unusual. I mean, it's got everything. You name it. Disappearances, weird animals, Sasquatch, UFOs, And like he said, some of these, if you look at the percentage of people that disappear or go missing, it's weird. Like he said, this is not a well-populated state. It's not. So if you look at the proportions, and I know that they say sometimes they have found, let's say, aircrafts, they'll find them sometimes they have found them years after the fact. And then others they're never heard of again. And some of them I've heard also that they're never found because the area that they went down in was very inaccessible as far as for any group that was going out there, any volunteers, search groups. And sometimes, depending, they don't really have a good idea exactly where it went down in. But still, there's a lot of them that nothing, hide nor hair is ever found of a human. There's no wreckage. Same thing also with I've heard with a lot of the waterways, the rivers, streams, the shorelines. A lot of unusual cryptid, like, and that one, that Portlook, where they, this was a little bit after the turn of the century, and this was like a thriving community. The economy was built around the cannery, so everybody had a job, and it ended up getting abandoned because people were disappearing. And you say, well, okay, but like he said, there were some that were eventually found, and it's like body parts or like brick part, like it was like, and then once that takes on a life of its own, little by little, I want to say if I read it correctly, I think it was like in the 1940s or 1950s, like the how do you call it? The last person that I think was manning the post office, and then that was it. That was the end of the because there's always the die hard before they finally said okay, and now it's just a ghost town, and yeah, that's right. It's on the Kenai Peninsula, and it was right at right at the turn of the century when it got established, and it's basically it was on a bay, and it was thriving, and from what I understand, even after the the people had moved away and basically there was nobody there. Even hunters that were in that area just hunting, they were describing having weird experiences, being chased by a creature, as in some type of Bigfoot, or what they call a bipedal creature. Other people that were staying in, camping or hunting, same thing, something going through their camp. So it wasn't just strictly to the people that were living there. So it's almost like whatever lived in that area, territorial, stayed there. And I think the most disconcerting thing is that this was not your typical Bigfoot encounter where you see something run off, or you hear snapping of branches or something like that, or maybe a call. This thing was aggressive. It was aggressive and sounded bloodthirsty. Let me tell you something. To empty out a town that was thriving, already had a post office, was everybody was employed. All right. That right there tells you that there's a lot of weird stuff that was going on there. So yeah, that's what you hear in a lot of these little areas in Alaska, and of course what he was talking about, like the Alaska Triangle. And I mean, when I grew up in Florida, the Bermuda Triangle, of course, you heard all those stories. And if I remember correctly, I think, and I'm not sure about this, but somebody told me that if you took the Bermuda Triangle the one that's here off the coast of Florida, that one of the touch points is Miami. Basically, the Dragon Triangle, the one that's by Japan, is basically, it's on this, like if you went through the earth and you took that triangle, it's on the same opposite side of the earth where the Bermuda Triangle is at. I don't know how accurate that is because I read or heard about it. This was a while back, but I remember that was one of the first times I had heard about that area off Japan, and that basically it was on the opposite side of the world where the Bermuda Triangle was at. And a lot of people could say, and what's up with the triangle thing? As in pyramid shape, as in, it's very unusual sometimes when you hear, that you could say, well, is it a coincidence? And also, believe it or not, there's a hypothesis where they believe that how can I say this? Where Atlantis used to be is right there, very, very close to where the Bermuda Triangle is, basically off the coast of Cuba. And that even that there have been, and I'm sure some people have seen that there was a sighting off Bimini where they had seen what they thought was either a road or a wall. I can't remember, but it was, and then there was some back and forth about whether it was man-made or where it was something done by the tides. But I can attest to it because I've been in that area. Over there, the water, depending on the water, is very, very clear. And I think somebody, the first time they saw it was in a small plane. And it makes you wonder, if there's any truth to Atlantis being in that area close by, as far as there still being some type of ruins there. Were they dabbling, or how can I say it? Was Atlantis made close to one of these magnetic centers because of maybe use of portals? Well, let's go there. Why not? Or was it the other way around? Was it something that they constructed, maybe some type of, how can I say it, invention, something that got away from them as far as, when you create something and the next thing you know, you've ripped a portal, a magnetics, whatever, and there goes Atlantis. I mean, why not? As far as that thing about that chamber that was found underneath the Sphinx, and I knew I had to look at this. This was published the day right before Christmas. Okay, and basically what it's saying is that a renowned Egyptologist has said that a man-made chamber has been discovered below the Great Sphinx in Egypt after a scan using new technology uncovered a void below the surface. Dr. Seyfazadeh has made the claim after his team used non-invasive techniques to map the underneath of the famous monument. They said that they found different areas of interest, but that the main section measuring 12 meters by 9 meters sits about 5 meters under the surface below the Sphinx. All right. That's very interesting. And I don't know what they call voids. I don't know if they're thinking, is this a chamber or is this just a hole? And this is one of these voids we believe is the most likely candidate for the Hall of Records. And the legend is that the Hall of Records is popular with people who hold alternative theories of ancient Egypt. Although no physical evidence has been found to date, the idea of an ancient library underneath the Great Sphinx was first coined by American clairvoyant Edgar Cayce and soon gained traction. And he basically, and I had heard that thing about the Hall of Records before. As a matter of fact, Cayce also pointed at that area off the coast of Cuba as being where Atlantis, or the ruins of Atlantis, were situated. He says the researchers don't think if there's something there, because they think that it's likely full of water because the groundwater level comes up to about 5 meters. And they think that the archive was breached. In other words, it's not sealed. And that the contents were removed and ended up in Hermopolis in Middle Egypt. All right. We'll see what comes of that. And, could those records have been found and moved? Are they still there? And if they're still there, would they ever say, yeah, we found evidence of Edgar Casey's prophetic dreams or visions? We've actually found them. Would they ever talk about it, you think? Would they ever say, yeah, we found it? Or, let's see. Which way do you think you could go? The Egyptian government could keep it, which of course it's part of Egyptian history. Or do you think that some private collector, just on the possibility, is making some type of quick, like hey, if there's any truth to that, I am willing to offer X amount for whatever's there. And let me see. Just for people that are not familiar with what the Hall of Records is, as far as, believe it or not, because everybody thinks, okay, besides the fact that you find a chamber under the Sphinx, which is, I know that there's even controversy of how old the Sphinx actually is. Okay. Because I've heard that they said it, because of what was it? The way the rain or the water had been, that it says that it was actually is much older than what people thought. It's one of those things that sometimes I want to say sometimes academics, if they put out a theory as far as age or, this was used for that, sometimes they have a problem backtracking and saying, no, we were wrong. Okay. Now, supposedly the story of the Hall of Records begins with Atlantis. And the story goes that near the end of days, the Atlanteans, basically what I guess this is according to the reading given by Casey, says there came the first egress of people to the Pyrenees and into what later became the Egyptian dynasties. All right. And of course, it talks about the eruptions and things of, I guess, basically it sounds like some type of cataclysmic event. And he says the people that left, they took records of the movements of stars and constellations. All right. And in those periods when the first change had come in the position of the land, there had been an egress of peoples from the Atlantean land, and they built a city near the edge of the Sahara. All right. So, I mean, that's very interesting, isn't it? And I know there's a lot of mystery schools out there which are built around the belief of either knowledge passed on from the Atlanteans. God, so much. In other words, that they believe that as far as ancient civilizations, there's much older civilizations of what you traditionally think of, that you say, ancient civilizations along the Tigris and the Euphrates and, Persia and all these things, but they're saying that there was older civilizations. Is that true? Isn't that? Interesting. We'll see what comes of that. I'm going to follow up on that. Again, guys, thank you for being part of my audience. Come back every week. I have a lot of great guests lined up. All right. Also, don't forget, you can go to my website and you can either find video links for any of the shows if you want to look at it on a video, in other words, a video version. Or if you want to just listen to the podcast, I've got links to different podcast platforms, and I've got links that will take you to where you can either listen to the MP3 file from the browser, or you can download the MP3 file without commercial interruption. All right. Either way. And I not only do I have it for Stories of the Supernatural, I also have it for Nightshade Diary and also for Supernatural Storytime. All right. You can go to nightshadediary.com or supernaturalstorytime.com. But all that information, you're going to find links to it from MiamiGhostChronicles.com, whatever the case might be. Again, I want to urge anybody has suggestions for guest topics, or hopefully you have your own unusual story that you'd like to pass along to me, I welcome it. You want to leave your name? Fine. If you don't want to, that's fine. Or, what's that saying about that show? Names have been changed to protect the innocent or whatever, or sometimes even the guilty, whatever the case might be. You know what? Anything like that. Also, I tell people it doesn't have to be, it could be a second or third hand recounting. It didn't have to be you that experienced it. Maybe it's a family thing. I'm even looking, if you've got strange tales of, true crime, things like that, hey, in my town, there was a story going around, blah, blah, blah. I'd love to hear that as well. So again, guys, take care. Hopefully this will be a wonderful year for all of us. And that's at least what I'm hoping for. And please come back next week, because I've got a lot of interesting topics and guests that I'm sure that you're going to enjoy listening to.